Hey guys, RJ Roger, no excuses. Now, before we start the show, I wanted to pop one to leave a disclaimer. In the show that you're about to watch, myself and Michael, we sit with acclaimed lawyer Anthony Cardinale, lawyer that represented John Gotti in the famous case between he and Sammy the Bull. Now, in this show, we discuss controversial claims made by Sammy, in which Sammy tells this story about this meeting that no one ever knew about, where John comes to Sammy and says, "Hey Sammy, we're going to work with the lawyers and we're going to put the rap on you. We're going to make you look like an animal. You're going to go to jail and I'm going to go free because the streets needs the boss." Okay? Now, no one ever knew about this meeting, and these are highly controversial claims made by the guy that went free against the guy that died in a supermax prison, chained to a bed, choking on his own spit, and died in that condition. So, now, Sammy's evidence is that there is a tape that exists between F. Lee Bailey and Jerry Capisci, in which Bailey is making these claims. Okay, so the position of the show is that a tape may actually exist. We have not seen it. I can't find it. Michael can't find it. Cardinale can't find it. But for the sake of the show, let's take the position that the tape exists. Why F. Lee Bailey would make these claims, I don't know. I asked them to Cardinale. You're about to hear his answer. However, it's a moot point, okay? Even if a tape exists, we take the position that it still does not validate what Sammy says. Sammy says he had a meeting with John. John told this to him. However, Diane Sawyer asked Sammy directly. His answer was not what he's claiming now. He was asked directly by Peter Moss in his autobiography. Direct questions that came from him by John Gleason. 302's cross-examination. At no place did Sammy ever make these claims until now, where everybody who could validate this stuff is dead. So, once again, in closing, we take the position that a tape may exist, but the tape does not validate these claims. And we'll break this down in further detail in the show that you're about to watch. All right, this is No Excuses with Michael DiLeonardo. I'm your host, RJ Roger, and with today's show we have special guest Anthony Cardinale. I would give my own introduction, but his resume is so extensive. I'm just going to pitch it to you, Tony, and have you tell me a little bit about yourself.
Good to see you, Anthony. It's been a long, long time, and
It's been long.
now esteemed esteemed person like yourself in this mob genre world that we live in today, we need some real factual basis on some history of the Gambino family and machinations of the Gotti trial with Gravano as a witness. And there's no better expert than you. You are the person that's going to tell us that was in there. You are you don't pull any punches. You're a straight guy. You're from the street, a street man. I always thought of you, attorney second. And, I know we're going to get the true facts here. There's a lot of misinformation out there. And you indulge us by coming on here. This world of this mob genre and factual history-based stuff is laying on your shoulders right now with one of the most important cases to lay out to date. So, because all of this information out there, other voices. So I'm going to turn it over to you, and you tell the world what really happened in that case.
I grew up on the west side in Manhattan on 47th and 9th Avenue. My dad and his brothers had a restaurant on 47th between 8th and Broadway. And I grew up there till I went to college in Pennsylvania and then later law school in Boston. When I was in Boston in law school, I started working with F. Lee Bailey, my second year of law school and my third year of law school. I was involved right out of law school with the Patty Hearst case, the appellate portion of that, and then later the Los Angeles aspect of her trials. from there, I worked with Bailey for another 5 years, and we tried cases together all over the country. That was a time that Bailey was really flying pretty high after the Hearst case. We represented Hotel Restaurant Workers Union. We represented the chairman of the Navajo tribe. We represented the Attorney General of New Mexico. We were involved in a lot of pretty major federal trials. I'd become aware that, and I have not and will never watch any of the stuff he's spewing out on YouTube or books he's written or anything, just because I know what a liar and piece of crap he is. I mean, he is the devil incarnate, if you will. And I could go on forever about that, but let's talk about what we're here to talk about, Gravano and the liar that he is. So, Gravano absolutely got to a point in November. Remember now, let's go backwards, okay, in the timeline. They get indicted, I believe, in December of let me look at my notes here. December 11th. They're arrested December 11th, 1990. All right. And in July of 91, so we're going, they're in there, 7-8 months by that time. The tapes have been played. These tapes that everybody's, he's saying, that John was, trying to do this and do that. They were played at the bail hearing. So everybody knew from day one just how bad these tapes were. Gravano knew from that day, not months later, not November, not when John supposedly said, I'm going to throw you under the bus. That's complete and utter bullshit. He knew what was on those tapes from the very first hearing in court. And at that time, he was represented by Shargel, I believe. Cutler was representing John, and I don't know who was representing LoCascio at the time, but he got booted too later. And that's how as I said earlier, how I got involved in the case. So in July 26th of 1991, Cutler and Shargel, the ruling comes down. Cutler and Shargel, you're out. You're on these tapes. You're really basically part of the family. You're not an attorney. You're part of the group that we're indicting. And they fought it, and then they got booted. And it was after that time that people were interviewed to become successor counsel to Shargel and to John and to Cutler. And so what happens is, I went back, so I'm sure about these dates, because it really, as far as I'm concerned, put the lie to anything that Gravano says about a meeting with F. Lee Bailey that I'm going to get to in a minute. In July 26, 91, Cutler Shargel DQ'd. Less than a week later, mind you, or a little more than a week, on August 2nd, Albert Krieger is in for John Gotti, and Ben Bronfman is in for Gravano. So we're talking about a 1-week window, months into the case. All those tapes have been listened to, all those transcripts have been delivered. Everybody knows what's on those tapes, particularly the guys who are on those tapes. Sammy, John, Frankie, they all know what's on there. And what happens, in my view, is that Sammy, he's nobody's fool either. Obviously, he didn't get to where he was in life without having balls and brains. I mean, I'm not trying to take that away, despite the fact that how he used those balls sometimes was wrong, like killing his brother-in-law because the guy was gay. I mean, there was no other reason. And I know he gives some cockamamie reason about why he did it. He was an embarrassment. That's why he did it. And a number of other ones that I don't want to get into. But he was a treacherous guy his whole life. I mean, you know better than anybody. If he had an angle to play on you, he's going to play it. Am I wrong?
Till today. Same way till today. Nothing changes.
They don't change their spots, do they? All right. This is his whole life. He's been like this. Let me find that angle, and I'm going to get myself through there, and I'm going to survive this way, and I'll do anything to survive. I'll do anything other than live up to what the oath I took. And again, I'm not here to be a cheerleader or anything like that. But I do know that this guy couldn't do time. By that time he was rolling good. He had all blue skies ahead. He had all the construction stuff that he was killing people to get, and John was getting blamed for. Everything was going great. He probably, I don't know how big big a stack he had somewhere, but that's when he starts to realize, wait a minute, this case ain't going to go good. And they all realize they're not stupid. You don't get to those positions if you're stupid. And John, let me give you an example. I mean, I've met a lot of very smart people in my life. I've been lucky, a lot smarter than me. And John was one of the most intelligent people I've ever been around. And I'm including, law professors. I'm talking about politicians. I'm talking about heads of giant corporations. I'm talking about anybody that I've come across in my 72 years of life. And he was one of the top, if not the top three, certainly in the top five. And you don't get to be in his position unless you have that kind of brain. You don't get to be in any of these guys' positions unless you do, like I said earlier. But one of these guys was really treacherous, and that was Sammy. Figuring out, and again, just go by his past, you can see where he wound up, why this happened. By November, he starts to realize, this is going to be terrible. And not only that, I'm going to look like the real bad guy here, because the tapes that you guys have gone over, where John is basically saying, what are we doing here? Where are we going? Every time this guy makes a partner, he kills him, and then I get the blame for it. We got to straighten this out. This has all got to come to a head. We got to get back to what we're supposed to be doing. This ain't the way things are supposed to be working. This isn't the Cosa Nostra I know, or what it's supposed to be. So Sammy's listening to all this, and he realizes, oh my God, this ain't going to go good. But I got an ace in the hole. Here's my ace: the Castellano murder. Because I will tell them a bullshit story, and it is bullshit from beginning to end. I will tell them a bullshit story. They will believe it because they want to believe it. They don't even care if it's impossible for him and John to be in a car across the street from Sparks, across 2nd Avenue, in the middle of rush hour, Christmas time, pre-Christmas, in a bus lane, staying there for 15, 20 minutes while they wait and watch the thing happen. And then supposedly Sammy drives him by so John can look and see that he's actually dead. That's bizarre. It's dramatic, but it's bizarre. And it's frankly impossible. Impossible. And they had another witness that I wound up getting in trouble with this judge so many times in that John's case. Among them was they had a witness, the only eyewitness, only guy. And he said, I heard the shots, and I turned and I ran towards the shots. Okay, and I'm like, wait a minute, were you in the Army? What are you, a special forces guy? I mean, what? Everybody else screwed. You hear gunshots, you go down or you get out of the way. And maybe they get you a shot in the ass, but your head's down. So this guy testifies that he recognized, I think he said Tony Roach as one of the guys. He picks out. And of course, now Sammy knows, let me put him in here because there's at least some corroboration to this bullshit I'm about to tell. And so this guy, again, I got in the case late. I didn't have a chance to do the work I wanted to do, all told. But when I hear this guy's story, I'm like, wait a minute, something's wrong with this. And so I start looking at his paperwork, and I'm looking at it. I'm trying to figure out, they got him hidden someplace, where he. I have the 302s, but I don't know where he is. And I pick up this 302 and I turn it over, and where they blacked out on the front, I could read the back. I read where he lives. And it was right there. I was like, oh, okay. So I sent an investigator I know in San Francisco to find out about this guy, because he used to work in San Francisco. Then he went to Oregon someplace. He comes back with all kinds of information that this guy was fired for robbing 2 different people he worked for, that he had a bunch of phony names. It was all kinds of stuff. Now, of course, I didn't have that when he was on the stand. And of course, the first thing the judge does, he wants to hold me in contempt for going out and trying to find out that I used investigators to find out where the witnesses are to go after them or to scare them or whatever. I'm like, hey, pal, hold on a minute. See this? You see this? There's his address. What do you want me to do? Throw it out? And he wouldn't let me put him back on the stand because, wow. Again, anything that would help John wasn't going in that case. So Gravano knew that's my ticket out of here. And he concocted a story. He told his story. They believed it. Again, it's like, it's true because they believed it to be true, and they needed it to be true, and they needed that particular count. And that's how he makes his deal. And he knew that from the first weeks in jail. Once he looked at that, once he heard those tapes, they were played in the bail hearing. It's not like all of a sudden it's this, the stuff gets handed to him and it dawns on him. So now let's get to Bailey, because I understand that this piece of crap is saying that Bailey was in a meeting with him and John and Frankie, where supposedly John says in words or substance, "Don't worry, we're going to win this case," because Bailey was supposedly brought there, according to Jerry Capizzi, about how he supposedly talked to Bailey a month before Bailey dies, when Bailey was in no shape to talk to anybody. He was on life support practically a month before he died, and it was dying from massive cirrhosis of the liver, problems with his brain. No way he had a conversation with this guy a month or so before he dies. Impossible. We'll get to that in a minute. But what happens, according to Gravano, as I understand it, again, I won't watch or read any of the things that come out. And I also understand that we're going to get to it, that despite the fact that none of this is any of his books, none of it's any of his testimony, none of it's anywhere. And by the way, when better to use it other than when you're getting cross-examined at John Gotti's trial to say he was going to try to put the thing on me. He was trying to throw me under the bus. That's why, why am I doing this? Because he was going to do it to me, so I did it to him first. Something like that. If he had that, he would have used it. That's it, period, end of story. Anywhere he testified, whether it was in front of Congress or any trial or anywhere, he would have used it. This story, where it comes from, I have no idea, but I can tell you one thing. It's a complete lie. It is absolutely, without question, against my known facts about the man John Gotti. And that I spent a lot of time, as I said, not only did I spend time with him during the course of the trial, following the trial, I saw him almost once a month until he moved to Springfield. I would spend at least one day a month when he was in Marion, spend hours with him, 2 days in a row, usually. So I know him. So as far as I'm concerned, that story is against everything I know about the man, my known fact group of facts. It's also against common sense. If you knew John, you knew nothing about John, but you knew everything about his past and the other trials he was involved in, and even his public statements or whatever people were saying, the thought that John Gotti would have ever told Sammy Gravano and Frank LoCascio, you guys are going to take the heat. You guys are going to take the fall here. I'm going to stay on the street. And that's how we're going to do it. And supposedly Gravano is now saying that's the reason I decided to go and say, okay, because this is going to go bad. Listen, it absolutely makes no sense. Nothing changed. Nothing changed from the day they got arrested to the day he left there in November. That was always the same set of facts. Why didn't he go in September? Why didn't he go? When I say September, why didn't he go a month earlier, or like soon after the trial, after the indictment came down? It makes no sense. His story makes no common sense. So it's against common sense. It's against known facts about John Gotti's personality and his thought process. and you know, it's impossible. It's an impossible story. And that he would have said that in front of a lawyer. Now, I'm not saying, again, I have a problem. I've been trying to get back and after we had a conversation about what this guy is saying about a meeting where supposedly John says in front of Bailey, in front of the co-defendants, that he's going to throw them under the bus. That, you know, I started to go back and look at, wait a minute, could this even be possible within that week period of time between the two disqualifications of Shargell and Cutler and the new guys coming in, Krieger and Bronfman? And is it possible that he went up to the MCC? It's possible, but he's dead. I can't, you know, and believe me, months before he died in April of 2021, write that, in 2021, April of 2021, Bailey's dead. And according to Gravano, this meeting, I guess, takes place between July 27th and August 2nd. Could he have been there? Possible. Can't check on it. I checked with his partner, who is a long-term, a very, very close friend of mine, former Superior Court judge in Massachusetts, Judge Ken Fishman, who was his partner at the time. I asked him, did you know about any of this? No, I didn't know of any meeting. I didn't know that he was going to a meeting. Frankly, I'll be honest with you, if he was going to such a meeting, Kenny would have been with him, because Kenny was the brains. You know, Lee was the balls. Kenny was the brains. Just like in John's case, John Mitchell, who was one of the greatest legal minds in the world, he was the brains, I was the balls. So we switched roles. But I can't say he didn't go there. So all right, let's say he did. Let's say he did. We got to go forward and then start saying, does any of this stuff make common sense? Does it track with other facts that we know, like when Bailey died versus when Capisi, and apparently Gravano saying he's basing some of his stuff because Capisi wrote an article. Capisi wrote an article on April 22nd, 2021. Sammy Bull, Gambino hitman Joe Watts was a rat against John Gotti. And it goes on, and he says, Gangland found Bailey, who was disbarred in 2001 and is working as a legal consultant in Yarmouth, Maine on Monday. That's 4/19/21. Okay? He died a couple of months later, Bailey. And he died a very hard death, if you will. He was on life support. He was in a mess. And he was not in Yarmouth, Maine then. He was in Atlanta with his son. And he died in a hospice there in Atlanta, like I said, just a matter of weeks after this. So I don't believe, unless Capisi can come up with a tape of that conversation, that it took place. And frankly, if it did take place, then if Bailey actually said those words, he absolutely did not know what he was saying and I don't know what this is all about or why he would even suggest that. Other than he might have been aware from his work with Joe Watts what was on those tapes, and certainly from the tapes you could say, oh yeah, I mean, these tapes are going to really hurt Sammy, about DeBono, about Melito, about other guys. It's going to hurt him. It's going to hurt him bad. But the fact that he supposedly said Bailey supposedly told Capisi. I'm trying to get the date here. I'm looking at this stuff. Again, he's writing about things that supposedly happened in 1991 in 2021, Capisi. And he's saying, and obviously it's based on shit he's hearing from, or stuff he's hearing rather. Edit that out, please. Stuff he's hearing off of Gravano's podcast and maybe whatever conversations these two rats have. One, he says that Bailey and Gravano had a memorable face-to-face meeting 4.5 years earlier. This is after Joe Watts pled guilty in 1996. Supposedly, they had a meeting, And according to Capici, John said, look, we can do anything. These guys here will take a fall for me. And Bailey supposed said, I saw Gravano give him an, oh yeah, look. I turned the case, he says, I turned the case down. And then Gravano called the FBI. That's his statement. Impossible. The timing is completely off. Okay, he didn't, if there was a meeting, and that's with a capital I, it would have been in that 1 week period between the end of July and the beginning of August, when the new lawyers come in. He didn't flip for another several months, 4 or 5 months after that. He didn't leave until November. This is the beginning of August. This is the end of July. What took him so long? It just, here's the other thing. There's no way, and of course everybody's dead. Bailey's dead. Frankie Lowe's dead. John's dead. The only person alive now that can make up the story is Gravano. That's it. Oh well, no, I can tell you this. What I can tell you without any question, and I mean it, and I'm saying with all the sincerity I can possibly bring to this conversation. The thought that John Gotti would ever say, look, these guys will take the fall for me. Don't worry about it. We can win this case. They'll take the fall for me. It's an impossibility. Those words would never come out of his mouth. John would have taken the fall in 2 seconds if he thought Sammy and Frank could go home to their families. 2 seconds, he would have done it for them. Never the other way around. His constant, I don't want to call it a rule. It wasn't, a rule, but this was his mindset, his credo was, we're in this together. We fight this, we go down and we win together, or we lose together. The thought of he's going to put somebody under the bus, that he's going to do something to hurt somebody, impossible. I mean, I can tell you this from my experience.
I have a question on that.
Shoot.
You ever hear John say that? We're in this together? We go in together? Okay.
Absolutely. First time I met him, when he called me in to become Frank's lawyer. And Frank and he called me in. I have a meeting with him and Frank. And I'm trying to think who else was there. I don't think Krieger was there, but John Mitchell might have been there because he was the brain part of the LoCascio team, and he was a partner of Jimmy LaRosa's. He said to me, and he didn't have to say it because I know it from his reputation and from the way he handled himself, the way he carried himself. He said, look, you understand something. If you come in this case, we are together. We go down as one or we win as one. You never, ever, ever separate us anyway. Whatever is going on, if it would help me and hurt Frankie, don't ever say that. If it would help Frankie and hurt me, again, don't ever get up and give one of those, this is only against my client, against the other guys, not against my client. And he made it very clear. These are the ground rules here. We are together. We'll die together or we'll live together, one or the other. And so the thought that he would have said in front of Bailey, who he didn't know, had no idea other than reputationally, he never would have met him at all. And in front of Frank LoCascio, who definitely never laid eyes on him and hated the sight of him, and told me throughout the trial, and the time that I knew him, that he thought that Joe Watts had made a huge mistake hiring, because at that time, remember, during this time we're talking about, Joe Watts was under indictment and he hired F. Lee Bailey. And that was all done through a close friend of Joe's and a very good investigator by the name of John McNally from New York, basically put him and Joe together. That there's no way John would have ever uttered words like he's quoted as saying, or even close to those words, that don't worry about it, as long as I'm okay, these guys will take the fall for me. And then supposedly Sammy, I realize he's going to throw me under the bus. So I got to make the first move. Nonsense. The whole thing.
Yeah.
Crazy.
You know, and if I could interject, because before they were even arrested, on the wiretaps, when John is speaking with Frank, they're having a discussion about lawyers and things like that. And John is telling him telling Frank long prior to being arrested, we got to stick together. We can't let these lawyers be separating us and things like that. John's on tape saying that. I would also say in Sammy Gravano's book, page 279, 279, second paragraph, Sammy's talking about a story where he goes to John asking for a severance. Okay. And Sammy quotes, this is Sammy right here. But when he asked for permission to seek a severance so that he could attempt a defense without directly contradicting Gotti, Gotti refused. And Gotti said, we're all in this together. I got to think of the future of the family. I got to think of the future of Cosa Nostra. That's in Sammy's book, page 279, second paragraph. I got to think of the future of the family. We're all in this together. Sammy's words.
Yeah. I mean, again, John had several trials before this. Those were the rules in those trials. Whether it was the Carpenter case or whether it was the one in Eastern District, everybody understood. And I knew that to be, before I ever sat with him in February of '92, I knew what it was going to be like. I knew that. And another thing he would say, we're never ever going to have a meeting. Don't ever come here and to talk to Frank unless we're together. And don't ever come and get me out and not bring Frank. Never. That would be like, it was like, okay, I got it. I got the message. Believe me, I'm not gonna. That's never gonna happen. But
so let me
story. Sorry.
Pose another question for me. So I'm just trying to put a timeline on your relationship with Bailey. So we're going to talk about maybe, let's say, I'm going to guesstimate about 14 or 15 years before this case with John and Sammy. And
Sure.
15 years you knew him, was associate, business partner, etc. Right?
Yep.
Now, after this case, after John gets convicted, you're still in contact with Bailey up until the O.J. Simpson case, at least, right?
Oh yeah. During that case, I was on the phone with him almost every day because there were certain witnesses, not every day, but during the part where they were bringing these FBI witnesses in, they were supposedly experts about blood, about clothing, and about this. And I had cross-examined these guys in other cases and sent them, my information and discussed with them ways that they could go about cross-examining these guys. And some of them were pretty effective. But be that as it may, even years after that, we would see each other. My daughter, her middle name is Lee. That's how close we used to be.
What's that?
My daughter's middle name is Lee, Michelle Lee Cardinale. And Lee, she was born when I was still with just left Bailey. I wasn't even with him, but that's how close we were. So, and later on in life, we weren't that close because he just was out of, once. You got to understand something too. During this time that we're talking about, '92, and when he starts representing Joe Watts, another thing that crosses my mind looking at this stuff fresh today, why wouldn't the government have sought to get rid of Bailey, disqualify him as Joe Watts' lawyer, if he had had these kind of conversations with Gravano? That would be a grounds to disqualify him. If you came in and you were going to represent somebody and you had a conversation with them, I can't now represent as a lawyer. If I sat with you, let's say, and we talked about your case, and then whether you hire me, you don't hire me. Now let's fast forward. I'm going to represent somebody you're going to be a witness against. I can't be the lawyer in that case because I might use stuff that I'm not supposed to use. How do they know? So there's another reason why this conversation could not have taken place, because he would have been disqualified as Joe Watts' lawyer.
Yeah, he's got to waive conflict, I guess, right? He would have to waive.
I guess he could. I mean, he could, but again, none of those. There was never a motion made like that. Never. Right. He never ever said, Gravano, until now, that he had these great conversations with F. Lee Bailey Bailey, was there when John said, "Don't worry about it. We're going to win the case because these guys are going to take the heat from me."
Okay, so my question is this: we're gonna take this timeline of almost 30 years that you know Bailey, but when you
so here's the thing. Before we go there, I don't want people to think that because I'm some kind of a fan or something that I have this folder behind me. It's John's photo, but these are letters that went back and forth and cards and for all kinds of stuff between he and I. And in these in these conversations, which I'm not going to share with anybody, his concern always was about everybody but himself. Always. Never, ever once about anything about him, about how he's being treated, about how tough the situation was, about I got wrongfully convicted, or woe was me, Sammy did it. Never. Not one time did he ever express anything that suggests that he would have done something like Gravano saying now, that he said in front of Gravano, "Don't worry, they'll take the heat from me. I got to stay out. I got to be the boss here." That was so far against his thing. But get back to Bailey. Yeah.
So my point to you is you've had a very tight partnership, business relationship for multiple decades, where this case was probably somewhere in the middle. You had a family, personal relationship where you named your daughter, middle name you said is Lee and him. Now, outside of lawyers speak that, like everybody else in coffee clutches, every profession has this coffee clutch. Did Lee Bailey ever tell you about that meeting? 1, 2, that John Gotti is a rat for saying that. 3, that Gravano said after to Bailey at any time he was thrown under a bus. And all these circumstances, all these years, and Lee was a drinker, right? Yeah. When you drink a little bit, sometimes it's like truth serum. So besides the personal relationship you had, and what he had with other partners that you know of that contact today, has there been ever that Bailey said, "I can't believe what came out of John Gotti's mouth. This guy sacrifices friends and let go and let them take the fall." Could that have ever happened?
And you got to remember too. You got to remember something. And if I didn't mention it, I should have. During John's trial, Bailey was there several days. I had 2 seats in that trial. It was like the hottest ticket in town. There used to be a line outside the courtroom, literally from inside the courtroom all the way outside down the street for people trying to get in to watch the trial live. And Bailey took my seats when Gravano was on the stand for both direct and cross. So he was there for a week. I don't forget how long Sammy was on the stand between direct and cross, but it was several days. We had dinner every night. We spoke together every night, hours. You think if you're going to say, if you're ever going to tell me, that's the time to tell me something about Gravano. If he ever had any connection like this, that's when I would have heard it. Never, not a word. And it would have come, he would have told me. Let me just put it that way. It wouldn't be anything he would hold back from me. We didn't have like secrets like that. What's the big secret? He says, according to Capisci, a week or so, 2 weeks before he dies, he says, that's when I decided I didn't want the case. Forget it. First of all, I know one thing. If they had offered him the case, he would have jumped on it like a dog jumping on a bone.
There you go.
You know what I'm saying? He would never have declined the case. Let's put it that way. That's why I don't think he ever was. Huh?
You stole my question. That was my next question. and let me lead you into it. All right.
Go ahead.
You may, counselor. Okay.
Yeah. I anticipated it. If you're getting the question, I wait for the questions. I'm sorry. I'm a bad witness. Lawyers are the worst witnesses, by the way. There's a lot more stuff than you can probably use that I'm saying here, right? I apologize for that. But go ahead.
It is good. You're giving us some great tidbits now. Yes, as an attorney, If a client wants to hire you, most of the time you're going to take the case. People represent the most reprehensible people on the planet at times because they need a defense. There's court-appointed lawyers because people can't afford one, etc. And you may not even like, you may despise the person, but you need to defend what your oath is, right? The Hippocratic oath, other stuff to go, right? So now you take a guy like Bailey. What kind of financial shape was he in
at that time? See, here's the problem. And again, I don't want to speak ill of the dead, but during this time that we're talking about, Bailey was in a huge problem in federal court in Florida, where he ultimately went to jail on a contempt. It did like 6 months before he could raise the money to get out. So if you want to know where he was financially at the time, again, this is all, I'm not talking out of school. This is all fact. You can check it out, the case, etc. I can give you all the, all the information that you need to check out the story I'm about to tell. He had a client that was in a very, very big drug dealer and had made multiple millions and millions of dollars. And while he made it, he bought property, he invested in stock, he did this, he did that. And so Bailey makes a deal for this guy. And this is now it's all coming back to me. This is the case that Frankie Lowe found and said, this guy, you realize this guy, I don't know how you could even have anything to do with this guy, because look at this case, and this was the case that I'm talking about. This is when we're on trial then. You got to understand, this is early on in the trial. He said, he showed me this case was a decision that had come down. I knew about it, where Bailey basically said, look, this guy will plead guilty and he'll cooperate, and you need to make this deal and do it now, but let me handle dealing with all the property, because if people find out that it's subject to forfeiture, you're not going to get $5 million for that vineyard in France. You're going to get one, and you're not going to get X amount of money for this because they know the guy's in trouble. So before it becomes public, let me go ahead and broker all this stuff out. And they had seized every penny this guy had. And he had millions of cash, he had millions of gold, he had stocks. There was one stock, though, that Bailey supposedly, and again, this is a big dispute between him and the federal attorneys. Bailey said, I'll do all this, but since I can't get any money, you've seized it all. I want to take this group of stocks. And so supposedly, according to Bailey, he says, okay, sure. Yeah, go ahead. Well, what happens is the stock goes through the roof while all this other stuff is going on. And Bailey is making millions. He sells it and he starts spending it. And Bailey had a very, very big lifestyle. That's one of the reasons why I decided it would not be good for me to keep going in a law practice with him, because every penny we made, and we made a lot of money. There was only 3 guys in that law firm, me, Bailey, and Kenny Fishman, and we made a lot of money. But when he was also running a helicopter company that was just sucking all the money we made. And then when he sold the helicopter company, and he owed me bonuses and raises for a couple of years, instead of taking that money and distributing it like he should have, he went and bought a new plane. And that's when I said, okay, this is not, this is not where I want to be ultimately in my life. This kind of practice. So Bailey had
So Tony, that was after the case. But at that time period,
no.
Well,
that time period during John's
that's
case.
what I'm saying. But after he would have got the interview, right? After the interview,
he needed. Let me just put it this way: he needed money like he needed oxygen
at that time, right?
At that time. So at that time, and again, I'm not speaking ill of the dead, because the facts are that he ultimately, when he was ordered to turn back the money, the whatever 3 or 4 million that or I think it was 2 point something at the end of it, he couldn't do it. He couldn't come up with anything, and he got put in jail till he could. So he did 6 months before he could raise the money, and then he owed everybody. But during this time period that I'm talking about, in February of '92, all this stuff was percolating out there. So if somebody had offered him a chance to take a case like this, forgetting about what you thought about the defendant or didn't think about the defendant. And believe me, we represented people a lot worse than, it's just the nature of the beast. You do your best, you win, you lose, whatever. Sometimes you win cases you shouldn't have won because of the nature of the client. Sometimes you lose cases you shouldn't have lost because the guy was a good guy. But that's the way the breaks go. But
the second part of my question would be, that's the financial aspect, because when you get that shingle on the wall, you do it to make money.
Yeah.
Right? Like a doctor. He's a healer.
Business.
But to make money.
I got a family.
That's right. And you want to live a great lifestyle, you invested your time. So when you get that shingle on the wall, now you take a high-profile case, such as the Gotti case. World news this is going to be, which it was. It wound up being world news. We're talking about till today. Yeah. We're talking 30-odd years later, right? We're still talking about it. And the world, and whoever likes this, speaks about it. This show's still going on about John Gotti and Cosa Nostra and the mob all over the place. So now you take that just for ego alone, prestige alone, a high-profile case. Why in the world would he say, I'm not taking this case because there's tapes? Are you kidding?
He also says, according to Capisci, he says, when he said, look, we can do anything, these guys here will take the fall for me, and I saw Gravano give him an oh yeah look, I turned the case down. Forget it. If they had put, a G note on the table, it would have been gone. You know what I'm saying? Let alone a fee that would come with a case like that. I mean, you're not talking about jump change, and you don't do these cases, but whatever else anybody might think, you don't do these cases because you want to put your name in the paper. You do these cases so you can pay the bills and you can put money in the bank and you can buy a place in Italy and you can have a nice life in Florida. That's why you do it. You don't do it because, I love to see my name in the paper. I mean, and you hit it on the nail on the head. If he was offered that case, he would have done everything he could to get that case. That time in his life, he would have done everything because it put him back in the limelight, which is very important. And he would have made a good chunk of money, which he needed more than oxygen. Put those two together. He didn't say, I'm not doing this case because this guy's going to throw these guys under the bus. Impossible. And if he ever said that, there was something wrong with his head. There had to be something wrong. And I doubt he ever said anything like that.
So I think I got one more. Okay. Now, you sat at trial, right?
Yes.
Throughout the whole case. There wasn't one day you said, I got to go to the bathroom while Gravano's on the stand, right? You never did that. You sat there.
Sure.
So now, on direct, the prosecutor, when they ask you all about your crimes, your good acts, bad acts, whatever, they go through your whole history. Now, sometimes motive comes out, right? Sometimes motive comes out. Was Gravano ever asked or said anything towards the defendant in any way throughout his whole testimony that I was thrown under a bus? John wanted to make me a victim. John said that the boss needs to go free. Was it ever teased about by the prosecutor? Because I think any good lawyer, prosecutor's a lawyer, right? So he's just on the other side of it. So any good prosecutor, any good lawyer would want to tease that out to say, look at that man over there. Look at blame this. That's why he's here today. John Gotti wanted to blame. And you know what? They see the guy next to him. That guy, frankly, was a fool. He should be up here too because you want to throw him on the stand, under the bus. He should be taking the stand. So that would come out, wouldn't it?
Never. And here's the thing, though. Here's the thing, and RJ, you pointed out very succinctly. If you listen to those tapes, if you had any knowledge of his prior trials, and certainly Gleason knew, he was there when he got the snot knocked out of him in that first Eastern District case. If you knew all of that, and you had a guy that could say, hey, he was going to throw me under the bus, That's why I'm doing what I'm doing. You'd use it like that. But what you do know as the prosecutor is that would never have ever happened. And if those words came out of Sammy's mouth at the trial, he would have been destroyed just by the tapes, just by everyone's knowledge about what's on there. And forget it. John would have been in, watched the rest of the case in the lockup, because he would have attacked him right there on the scene if he ever said something like that. And he would have done it. By the way, if originally I thought, and we had a brief conversation, that it was Bailey's idea that he could get out by putting those two guys under the bus. And like I said, if Bailey, those words ever came out of his mouth, he wouldn't have made it out of MCC alive, and it would have been another count in the indictment, So
yeah, it's definitely a nugget that is so you don't hold that for decades and never share that. Like you said, it wasn't in 302. He sat down with Diane Sawyer. It wasn't said in that. He published a book with a really respected guy, top writer, Peter Moss, wrote a lot of great books, even in this subject. And I would even add in that book, which I've already discussed with you guys, he says, and I quote, this is on page 285 of Sammy's book, first paragraph. He says, John doesn't say point blank to me, you have to take the weight. That's what he says in his book. He said,
what do you want? And I guarantee you there's a tape that Peter Moss has of that conversation if he's quoting him.
He's quoting Sammy. I'll read the whole paragraph. That gets me to thinking. I got no apologies. I got no severance. I got no defense. John don't say point blank to me, you got to take the weight. But now I can see that he's setting me up for that. That's a different theory. Saying, well, I feel like, I think, is very different than saying someone said it to you. So the last thing that I would add about that was when he sat down with Patrick. Now he talks about this meeting that no one ever knew about. And he even calls it a personal meeting with John. He says, he sits with me, referring to John. John sits with me personally and says, Sammy, we're going to work with the lawyers and you're going to take the weight and I'm going to go free. Sammy then says, do you want that, John? And then John responds, Sammy, the boss has to be on the streets. There's a video on Patrick Bet David where Sammy is sitting there saying this. Everybody can watch it. He's talking about this meeting where John tells him directly, you got to take the weight. But in his book, he says John doesn't say you have to. John never said to me point blank that he wants me to take the weight. It's just what I was kind of thinking. He even says on Diane Sawyer, he says, and she asked him, when did you decide to cooperate? He says, well, the tapes sound like, oh, poor John Gotti. He lost control of Sammy the Bull. And the theory, he said, is by the lawyers that the jury could look at it that way. And just maybe the jury might acquit John Gotti. He said, it sounds this way, this theory. But he never talks about this personal meeting where John and him had a discussion and John said, you're going to take the weight. This is something completely new that he's bringing out.
It should never happen. You know what? He's a liar, but he's not careful enough. And he doesn't think anyone's going to double check or fact check him. He thinks he can get away with this stuff. And the fact of the matter is, John, you guys went through the tapes. I encourage anybody that's watching this, go back and watch your analysis of these tapes. John never says, this should be on Sammy, all this stuff he's doing. He's saying, I did this, and I did it for these reasons. John's not saying, I didn't have anything to do with this. I mean, that's what the problem with the case was. I mean, those tapes were pretty hard. He's saying, look, did DB talk, to you, blah, 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 blah. I took his word for it, but I ordered it. Mm-hmm. This was me. Yeah. My mistake. My mistake may have been listening to this guy, but that doesn't take him off the hook. This is just his crazy mind working in a way to say, how can I make myself look okay here? How can I make myself, seem like I'm this real tough guy that all of a sudden the light went on and, I did this, for the following reasons. And then it makes no sense. It makes no sense at all. And again, he just doesn't realize that there's things out there that are gonna trip him up on this stuff.
Yeah.
So I just picked up on this, RJ. You said we're going to have a meeting with the lawyers. John's telling Sammy we're going to have a meeting with S, right? There's a plural there, an S.
He says, John sits with me personally and says we're going to work with the lawyer. I mean, we're going to work with the lawyers and you're going to take the weight.
Okay, right. Lawyers, you're on the case. You're one of those plurals. You're lawyers, right? On the case.
But remember, I got in the case. He was gone. He was gone after that. He was already with the government when I got in February or at the beginning of late January. I got involved, late January I got involved in the case from '92. But there were other lawyers that are alive. Like John Mitchell, whoever else would have been there. Bronfman. No, he wouldn't have been there because. Yeah, no, Bronfman would have been at one of these meetings with the lawyers. He's around. Krieger's not around, but he might not have been there. But then Shargel's unfortunately dead, so there's another one. But Bruce Cutler would have to be part of that meeting. And whoever else was representing at the time, Frank LoCascio before me, and that would have been David Greenfield. He's alive. So I guarantee if you go back and ask any of those people, did any kind of meeting like this ever happen? The answer is a flat no, never. It's just, it makes, again, it's inconsistent with everything that's on those tapes even. It's inconsistent with that because John, again, he may have been talking about certain things, but he's never taking himself off of whatever happened. He understands it's my responsibility. This is my, I take, the buck stops here kind of thing. I did it. Whatever he came to me the story, but I did it.
This is my next question here to follow up on that. Now, Krieger, let's say it was Krieger, who was one of the guys that may have been posted about John. They're going to sit down with lawyers and work out strategy with John could walk free. Krieger would have mentioned it to you.
Oh, yeah, 2 seconds.
Bruce Cutler not mentioned. Bruce Cutler? Who's going to be quiet?
Yeah, but he wasn't a quiet guy. Believe me, trust me when I say this, and I don't know how to be more sincere or to be more genuine about it. If that conversation had ever truly taken place, not just some fast, whatever is going in that squirrel mind of Gravanos, if that had happened, I'd know about it. I would have known about it from Krieger. I would have known about it from Cutler. Certainly, I would have known about John. If he said it to somebody else, he would have said it to me. You know what I mean? If that was going to be that was going to be something that they were going to rely on. And oh God, now what are we going to do? We can't do it. Well, we still could do it. You know what I'm saying? If that was going to be our defense, that he did everything. That was never brought out. That we're going to try to put everything on him. We did the best we could with what was there. But again, if that had happened, it would be in the book. It would be in the interviews. It would have been at trial. It would have come from other lawyers. F. Lee Bailey, Shargel, they were all still around then. I would have heard that.
Also, now Frankie Lowe was your client. Now Frankie Lowe, you see him post conviction, right?
Once or twice, yeah.
Okay, did Frankie Lowe ever mention it? John,
no, never. And I was with his son all the time. If that conversation would have ever taken place, he would have told his son. His son would have told me. And I'm going to give away something. And I forgive me, John, for this. I did see Frankie Lowe one time without John there. Okay, just him and I. He never said anything about it. He never said a word. He just wanted to know more about me. We didn't know. John knew me. He didn't know me. John knew me in a sense because I would be around them on the weekends when he was on the Eastern District case, the first case, and when Fat Tony was in the MCC, I was there every weekend, and John would be in the same room. And one of the reasons that I think that John suggested that I could come in at that late date was he knew the way I worked. He knew the way I, the way I particularly treated, the way I looked at clients like John, like Mr. Salerno, any of them. They know more than I know. That's one thing. Lawyers, I always get a kick out of lawyers who say, "Oh, I don't want to know. Don't tell me, what happened." I want to know everything. Because you know what, and I tell this, I give lectures to young lawyers. And look, you understand something. When there's a crime happens, let's say your client gets picked up, unless there's a tape, unless there's a video, the only person that was there is your client. The cops weren't there, the DA wasn't there, the jurors weren't there, the judge wasn't there. So there's one person though that you can get a lot of information from that these guys will never know. And I can't tell you how many times I've won cases because I know something they didn't know, because I asked my client about it. And, it's just, as I say, he knew that's, I was the kind of person I would be there. I need to know what's going on. I need to know, what's happening with all this. And the only thing that I could ever come up with, and believe me, it spent a lot of hours, a lot of time, and talking with Frank, talking with John. Why is this guy pulling this? Why did he do this? What could be the reason? And other than, again, everybody knew going. You look at the evidence in the case, it was going to be a very, very difficult case, unless something could happen that you could come up with some magic bullet in the middle of it. Or some juror would take a dislike to the government, which actually did happen in the case. But the only thing that everybody could come up with was he knew that the way out of that case was to come up with a story about the Castellano murder, that in return for that, they would give him the courthouse, and many courthouses, and which is what they did. Because think about it. What did they need him for? What did they need him for? And I get excited when I think about it. Nothing except that. Right. Except that.
And even without that, Tony, he gets convicted, John. He gets convicted for murders. He gets convicted for stuff. He gets convicted for the
only murder that mattered.
Right.
The only one. He knew that. He absolutely knew that I got this card I can play, and I'm going to bullshit my way through it, but they're going to take my bullshit because they want this more than they want the Bono, more than they want Melito, more than they want, DB, more than they want. All that stuff is just, window dressing. Castellano hit bad. That's the drama. That's the sex appeal.
So I got one more question. You opened a pretty good door, and it has to do with Frankie Lowe. And there's all this stuff out there about Frankie and this very bad relationship with Gravano and him that were going to kill John when they got out if they won the case. Now, throughout this whole case, you sat with both defendants in lunchrooms, right? After you had lunch, you got food from Denoy and other restaurants, and you had some fun, some laugh. John and Frank were jovial. I don't want to put words in your mouth. Were they friendly? How'd they react?
They were like brothers. They were like brothers. And don't forget, when Frankie got sentenced to 5 life terms, he said, "You got anything to say?" "Yeah, I wish there were more people like John Gotti in the world. The world would be a better place with more people like John Gotti." Those were his words. So you telling me he was going to whack him because if they survived the case because of what was on those tapes? Forget about it. Never happened. They were like brothers. You're
the insider. That's why you're here. I wasn't there in that forum with them, but you are at the real low moments of their lives and very serious where they spend the rest of their life in jail. Now, Torey LoCascio.
Yeah.
I was friendly with Torey after that case. He helped me with my case, with discovery, which I got from nobody else but him. And
Okay.
he never once expressed discontent for John Gotti that he abused his father. So now you had a different relationship, more personal than I had with Torey LoCascio. Did Torey ever say John abused his father?
Never. Never.
Okay.
Never.
Well, this is why we needed you. This is why we needed you to give.
I can't say later in life. I don't have anything to do with Frankie. You know, later in life, and it's you know, and I knew his son very well. And during the course of the appeals and later on, we spent time together, both in New York and in Boston. Never once ever said anything that there was some friction between the two of them. But you know, again, all I can do is I tell you, when we were all together during that trial, they were like brothers. That's all I can say.
Tony, how would you respond? So if someone, you know, because there's always those people, there'll be people who watch this and they'll say, oh, he's just a Gotti fanboy. He's just being biased towards Gotti. He wouldn't tell the truth anyway because of Gotti. How would you respond to someone who might take that position?
Well, the only way I can respond is with the truth. To say that I admired John, yeah, absolutely. Anyone who had a chance to meet him and spend time with him, not in any, you know, in a friendly way, or even talk to him about legal things, you had to come away with admiration of his intellect and certainly of his wit, and also of his loyalty. I mean, you know, the thought that John Gotti would ever do anything to hurt somebody in his life or hurt anybody. I mean, other than, you know, I'm saying like, it just, you know, and I'm not talking about, oh yeah, this guy got whacked or that. I'm talking about people that were his so close people, that he would ever do something to help himself at anyone else's expense. Never. It would never happen. And you want to call me a fanboy? Yeah, in the sense that I admired the guy. I admired his strength. I admired his loyalty. I admired his intellect. Absolutely. You know, I'll plead guilty. You know, that's the nature of the beast. And I've never made any qualms about it. Anybody that's ever asked me about John, they would hear the exact same thing. I'm not saying this now, and I never said it before. You know, this has been, you know, something that, whether it was following the case, I was on, on several different programs, and they'd ask me about John. You'd hear the same thing. I mean, it's not stuff I'm making up. This is who he was. He was he was in the parlance, a man's man, with a capital M. You know, and the thought that a guy like him would ever do anything to benefit himself at the expense of somebody else, like Gravano's saying, it's impossible. It's a lie. It's plain and simple.
Well, you know what? I'm going to speak for a guy that's not here anymore. John Gotti.
Yeah.
I really appreciate what you just said about him.
Oh.
His look, they call me fanboy. Yeah, how do you get to be a fan? How do you fall in love with somebody unless you get to know them?
Yeah.
And either dislike them, have no feelings, or you fall in love with a woman. So John Gotti's work.
Yeah, I mean, you know that. I think I've told you the story, but it bears repeating. The kind of man we're talking about. This was the kind of guy that when I saw him in Marion, and I knew the circumstances in which they were keeping him, and the abuse that he was literally getting, in the sense that he got a massive infection in his jaw because of implants, because they wouldn't give him medical attention. They just wouldn't. They give him aspirin, and his jaw was sticking out like this, and yet they had to pull out all the implants because that infection was so bad. He couldn't get out in the sunlight. He was given the worst food in the world. Even if you could buy food, there was nothing that's going to make you. It wasn't fresh fruit or anything that you would want to eat that's going to make you do good health wise. They literally killed him, as far as I'm concerned. That turned into cancer, and the rest is history. But even in that circumstance, he said, don't you ever lift a finger to change anything. I would never let anybody know, particularly those guys, that they're doing anything that can affect me, because you can take me and chain me to that radiator over there in the corner, and for the rest of my life, and as long as I know that my kids, my wife, my daughters, my sons are all right, my family, all the rest of my family, you can leave me right here. And then he said, yeah, typical John fashion, and always remember one thing, Tony said, they treat me a lot better than I would treat them if the tables were turned. So, that's the kind of guy he could be, even in a circumstance like that. I guarantee you that if anybody listens, to any of his tapes, because I know they came out later, tapes with him and his son talking and his daughter and whatever. You listen to any of those tapes, take the time to listen to them, and you will see what I'm talking about. This is a guy who would do anything to not hurt people that he loved or considered to be part of him. And that would include Sammy Gravano, Frank LoCascio, period. It just doesn't ring true. It isn't true. And shame on him for doing what he's doing, trying to make John look like him. He ain't Sammy Gravano. That's Sammy Gravano he's talking about. That's projection.
The interesting thing about those tapes, I just thought, this guy held at least for the people he cared about, that he considered, I love this person. When this guy's expressing rage on these tapes only because he wants to see a picture of their house.
I want to die before you have a toothache. That's the truth. You understand? I got nothing. I got no group pictures.
They did it.
I got group pictures. Let me tell you who I got the group pictures from. I got it from Mary and Di Maria. She sent me all her 4 grandchildren to get her in a picture. I got it from Jojo Carrazza. He sent me his group picture of all his kids. You want me to go on? I didn't get none from mine. I got it from Funcy Siska's wife, Mary Jane. She sent me the group picture of her 5 grandchildren. Do you know she got 5 grandchildren? You don't know she got 5. I know. You know why? They sent me the group pictures. Because I'm their father. I'm their grandfather. I'm not your father or John's father or these kids' grandfather. I'm theirs. I'm confused. They not.
He's saying, I want a picture of, send me a picture of this house, of this person. I want a picture of my grandkids. I want a picture. He's very upset. He wants a group picture. These homes and stuff. And I was thinking, man, I just want to see a picture of almost like he was living through. Even you told, I think me and you talked before, and you were talking about like when you would have a glass of wine that he would tell you to try. He wanted you that he'd want to.
Well, during the trial on either a Friday or a Saturday night, usually it was a Saturday night, he would make arrangements for me to go to a restaurant. And he'd arrange everything, the place, the table, the menu, the wine. And one time, I forget the name of the restaurant, it was a really good restaurant. And what he would do is he could get to a phone, and while he was MCC, he would make the reservations. And then on Sunday, when I saw him Sunday afternoon, he would ask me about it, and vicariously, he would enjoy the meal that I just had, because it was all things that he would have ordered for himself. Like One If by Land, they had the
Wellington,
beef Wellington. Yeah, so I think it might have been in this restaurant, because the wine would go with the beef Wellington, and beautiful place. And so I'm telling him about it. Oh yeah, it's the best I ever had. And he says, "How about the wine? Do you like the wine?" And I said, "Oh man, do I like the wine?" I was kind of thirsty. I was working. I ran a little bit, and so I was kind of thirsty, and I think Mitchell and I were together at this dinner, and I said, "I'll tell you the truth. We've never ever had a wine as good as that. In fact, we had 2 bottles." And he went, "What? The Petrus? You had 2 bottles of that?" What? I told him 1, and I said, "Hey, what are you going to do? It's 20." And I find out it's $2,600 a bottle, or maybe even more. I don't even know what it was, but that was the end of him ordering the wine. But that's the kind of the guy. And again, I wasn't part of his life in terms of whatever the government says he was, but I know him as a man. I know him as a family man, I know him as a human being. I know from that and from all the time I spent with him that anything that Sammy's saying about John telling him he's going to take the heat, it's just a lie. It's just that simple. Impossible.
Well, Tony, you know, this channel, and Michael, he said it many times. He didn't decide to do this. We didn't decide to do this. Me being a part of this, he didn't ask me to do this because he wanted to make a lot of money or become a famous podcaster or get a lot of views. First thing I said to kind of sway him a little bit is, hey, Michael, if you don't tell your story, someone's going to tell it for you. And we were having a lot of conversations about on the phone privately about what he believed to be historical inaccuracies about John, about history of Cosa Nostra, about a lot of Michael's friends, people who he cared about and loved in the streets. So what was important to him, this whole thing that we're doing is to create a historical record. Michael, would you agree? That's how, and us from the first time you left a comment, I saw you in a comment section somewhere, and Michael reached out to me and said, hey, you should get in touch with him. He's the closest insider that can answer some of these questions, which is why we wanted you to come on to the show. Because one thing with Michael saying it, it's one thing with his family saying it, it's one thing with his friends saying, but when you get, you're a credible guy, you're a legitimate guy, you're a lawyer, you're a legal guy, you're a legal professional, so your voice carries weight to answer some of these questions. So, yeah, anything you want to say to close out the show? I mean,
thanks for having me. Thank you guys for having me on because, again, to be able to say the truth against the kind of nonsense that Sammy is spewing about John saying that he's gonna take the heat and so John can stay on the street, that can't go unanswered, and thank you, Mike, for giving me this opportunity to assist in setting the record straight. Okay, I'm not here, as I say, I'm not here to put John on a pedestal or to make people think he was something other than he was. He was what he was. But one thing he was, and that was he was loyal, and he was never ever to something like Gravano is claiming he did. And I don't care what Capisi says, Bailey said. You've got my thoughts about that. I don't think it's even possible given the time frame of these conversations, given the condition that Bailey was in. And there's no way Bailey walked away from a case because he thought John was going to throw somebody under the bus. I mean, it just, it doesn't, the whole thing doesn't ring true, none of it. Well, thanks guys for having me. If I assisted in any way, I'm happy. Anybody has any questions, put them in the comments, I'll answer them.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of questions. There's going to be a lot. There's going to stimulate a great conversation. Just my feeling. I think there is a videotape of Bailey out there talking about this subject. Yeah, if there is, it's Bailey's motive for doing this. My feelings. Why would Bailey not be in that case? There's no way it was Bailey's decision not to be. If anything,
thing I can say, if I could put myself in Bailey's mind now, a little bit, just a little bit. If he ever said this, and I guarantee it, you have to show me the tape, before I'd even believe it. If you say exists, I'd love to see it. But this also got to remember, all this stuff is coming out at a time when Bailey is being accused of engineering a deal for Joe Watts. And he's saying that the reason they got such a good deal is because Gravano was scared to be cross-examined by Bailey. I don't know if you heard that stuff. This is one of these another one of Capisi's articles, like a week before, the week before the Gangland News, where John says, Bailey says, that's, Gravano. I said to myself, I don't want this case. I said to myself, when he said these guys will take the fall for me, we're going to win it all right. I saw the look of Gravano gave me, Bailey continued, and I said to myself, only myself, I don't want this case. These guys are all game players, and Gotti just threw Gravano on the bus. Horseshit. Never, ever. And if he ever said anything like that, I'd have to see it. Never happened. No way he turned down the case. No way at that time, as we've just discussed. The second thing is, right around the same time, a week before, Capisi has something out saying about Bailey saying, I pled Joe Watts guilty because they did not want me to he got such a good deal because they didn't want me to cross-examine Gravano, and they knew I could destroy him and then they get John Gotti out of jail and everybody. Total horseshit. Now, he might have said that, but it wasn't true. I mean, it absolutely wasn't true because Gravano was going to be, if they went to trial, Gravano was going to testify. You know, but this stuff here about their concern was I would damage Gravano enough on lies he had told in prior cases, jeopardize conviction, including Gotti, said Bailey, insisting that that was the only reason they brought the offer down that low. Total, unadulterated bullshit, if he said it.
So let me get this straight. Let's see if I can. So Gravano is now using Bailey to buttress his case on John. Yeah. But Bailey, he's going to expose Gravano as the biggest liar, that the government was afraid and Gravano was afraid to face F. Lee Bailey. How does that work? How does that correlate?
He goes on. Here's another quote. His story is bullshit, said Bailey. Asked if he denied Gravano's claim that Watts was a blah, 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 Bailey punted. If any part of that were true, I couldn't talk about that, he said. I'm simply saying Gravano is full of shit. That story has nothing to do with Joe's decision to plead guilty in the case. They had wanted 20 years. They came down to 6. And you know, what happened is Sammy is saying in the same article, oh, no. They knew I was going to come. That's why they took the deal. They knew I was going to come. That's why they took the deal. And the reason was the deal was good. Again, he's slamming Joe Watts, saying Joe was a dry informant. And, that's why he got whatever deal he got. It's all insane. You know, it's like, you know, he said, she said, and you got two guys. If Bailey ever said that, he's just full of it. You know, there's no way that's true, that they made the deal because they were so afraid that Bailey was going to crush him on cross-examination. That's not going to happen. Not. Anyway,
Tony, we may have to have a rebuttal because RJ told me Gravano's coming out with something, a presentation on the Bailey stuff and this whole case. He's going to present the case, so you may have to come out for rebuttal. You up for it, Counselor?
Let him chew on this stuff, and then let's see what he has to say. We should go first and then see what he has to say about it.
To me, though, it's a moot point, the whole Bailey thing.
Yeah.
Because before you even get to this, again, 302s, Diane Sawyer, book, this information would have came out.
Examination.
This stuff.
You get every opportunity to say, right. You want to know why I did this? Because he told me he's going to throw me.
It's in the guy's I'm reading the autobiography that his quotes given to Peter Moss. He said in this book, page 285, John did not tell me directly. John did not tell me to take the weight. This is just what I was kind of feeling and thinking. I can accept that argument, and most people would. I don't agree with it, but we can all have our own theory. Well, I kind of feel like my wife's cheating on me. Doesn't mean she's cheating, though, just because you feel that way.
I got a better one with his feelings. He felt Louis Molino was talking behind their backs. He felt EB was talking behind their backs. Mike the Bat was going to be a rat. Nicky Cowboy was going to be a rat because they're drug addicts. And we could keep naming names. His brother-in-law was a liability. But it's every time he thinks of something, somebody dies. And in this case, 2 other people died in prison.
Again, I just want to read the quote one last time. John Gotti don't say point blank to me, you got to take the weight.
Yeah. Well, what's happening, I think, what he's doing now, he's clutching on, again, I got to see this tape if it exists, or the Capisi supposed interview. That time in Bailey's life, he was in no shape to tell the truth about anything. He was a mess. And again, I'm not speaking ill of him. It's a fact. He was very, 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 very ill in the last months of his life. And There's no way that, you know, that he said these things, and if he did, it's an impossible story. And again, I maintain, and will to the day I die, that the reason he decided to do what he did was he, like everybody else, could see, okay, we're going to go down, but let's go down swinging. He didn't want that. He didn't want to go down swinging. He didn't want to be a man, if you will. You know, you're supposed to get in this light. You understand what it is. You know, the old saying goes, you're going to die in the street or die in jail. That's what you know, that's what it's supposed to be, I guess. But the point is, he knew he had that little card he could play, the big card, the Castellano card. And without that, they would have told Sammy, pound sand. You're the worst guy in this whole. You're the worst guy in the whole thing. Whatever happened, you know, in terms of a lot of these things that we're talking about in the apartment, they were all Sammy's ideas. They were carried out, you know, whatever. But you know, he knew that. He knew he couldn't win the case. He knew that. And you know, anybody with a half a brain could know that. But he realized, I ain't going to go down. Fuck these guys, is what he said, not the other way around. You know what I mean? And not that John said, fuck you, Sammy. You know, I'm putting you under the bus, and fuck you, Frankie, you're under the bus. He's the only one that was throwing people under the bus. And now he's got this revisionist stuff going on in his head. Maybe he's like, you know, the guy from Seinfeld. It's not a lie because he believes it. It's a lie. I don't care if you believe it or not. Sammy, listen to me. If you believe that, you're insane, because it never happened.
Thank you, Tony.
Okay.
Tony, we'll be in touch.
All right.
Thank you for joining the show. You helped and clear up a highly debated piece of a discussion that's out there that's been going around for a while. I think you're probably the most credible voice to come on to be able to speak about it. So we're grateful to have you on our show. And guys, like as Tony said, if you guys want to leave comments, he'll respond to them. And that's all I got. Michael, close it out.
Tony, we're honored to have you on here. Distinguished fellow like yourself, somebody who knows the ins and the outs, the machinations of the courtroom, and what goes on in the minds of people like myself. And we really appreciate you being here. And John's spirits, thank you. I'll thank you for him.
All right.
Thank you, Tony.
Anytime.
Take care, guys. Yep.
Bye-bye.